Aloha mai kako. Welcome to the second panel and the Water Protectors Rising series, Watering the Buds of Solidarity. My name is Annie Frederick. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaiʻi Alliance for Progressive Action. HAPA is a Hawaii-wide organization working towards a more socially, environmentally, and economically just Hawaii, where the well-being of our land and people are prioritized above corporate profit. In partnership with the Sierra Club, we are co-hosting the Water Protectors Rising series to explore the interconnected fight of water protectors around the world. While this series was created in response to the Red Hill water crisis on Oahu, we recognize that this is a systemic issue that impacts communities around the world, with Black, Indigenous, and people of color often bearing the brunt of the harm. The US Navy has shown blatantly again and again that it views our water and the lives of those impacted, including their own personnel, as expendable. However, we know there is power in learning from one another and in building solidarity across communities facing shared struggles. This particular panel brings together island communities on the front lines of US military environmental injustices. We also know that island communities are uniquely aware of our finite natural resources and hold powerful homegrown solutions, which you will hear more about today. We're so grateful to our wonderful panelists and moderator who are joining us from Puerto Rico, Guåhan, and Hawaii. I'd also like to thank the HAPA staff and Sierra Club staff for their hard work to put together this series, all of our co-sponsors, and all who are engaged in the fight to protect water. And with that, I'll hand it over to Wayne from the Sierra Club.
Again, aloha mai kako. My name is Wayne Tanaka. I am the director of the Sierra Club of Hawaii. I'd just like to echo, the deep gratitude that we have for our amazing panelists for sharing their time in Mana'o with us today, as well as for the amazing team at HAPA, as well as Anna Chua, our own Red Hill organizer, who have all done such a tremendous amount of behind the scenes work bringing this important panel together. And most of all, I'm just want to express my gratitude to all of you for joining us today to learn about these ongoing campaigns to protect water. Because as you'll see, too much of our society has forgotten this duty, our duty to protect our most precious resource, one that will be even more important than ever before as we navigate this climate crisis. And so it's really up to all of us to band together across communities, across oceans, to stop this sacrifice of water and of islands, and to create a new normal where water and life take precedent over institutions that are designed to destroy and exploit. And so today is just another step in that journey. And with that, I will turn it over to Tina Grandinetti, our esteemed host and Oahu Water Protector. Iole ikawai.
Aloha, my name is Tina Grandinetti. I have the honor of moderating this amazing panel today. I'm zooming in from the Ahupua'a of Waikiki on Oahu, but I was raised in Mililani, and I come into this discussion as an Uchinanchu settler in Hawaii. My ancestral lands are in Okinawa, which faces very similar issues of occupation and water contamination by the US military. So I'm really personally invested in growing solidarity between our islands, and I'm so excited to learn more from our panelists. I'm a member of Oahu Water Protectors, which came together in response to the Red Hill crisis. I'm also a board member of Hawaii Peace and Justice, an organization dedicated to demilitarized futures for Hawaii and the Pacific. And I'm a member of the International Women's Network Against Militarism. And my day job, I work in the office of Representative Amy Peruso. So for today, it's my honor to be joined by a group of very powerful individuals who've led the way for water protectors everywhere and will probably continue to do so for many more years to come. So I'll just briefly introduce our three panelists. Our first panelist is Myrna Pagan. Her Taino name is Inaru Kuni, Woman of the Sacred Waters. She was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, raised in New York City, and has resided in Vieques, Puerto Rico for half a century. She's an artist, activist, mother, abuela, great-grand-abuela, and the widow of Charles R. Connolly. She spent decades advocating for the people of Vieques and opposing the US Navy's desecration of their land. She's part of the National Council of Elders, the Ceasefire campaign, and is a founder of Vidas Viequenses Valen. In 2003, she and her community were able to successfully shut down the military base and stop the bombings of Vieques. However, the island and its residents still suffer the consequences of decades of contamination. Our second panelist is Maria Hernandez May. She's a daughter of Guåhan, Samoru, Filipina and Mexican mother of 3, and an environmental and cultural rights activist. She's also a member of Ihagin Famalawan Guåhan, a 2022 Bertha Foundation Fellow, and a core member of Putehi Liteksan and Savertidian. Putehi Liteksan Savertidian. Her advocacy work primarily focuses on protecting Guåhan's sacred lands, women, and girls. And last but not least, we have Dr. Kalihua Krug from Waianae, Hawaiʻi joining us. Dr. Krug is a Kanaka Maoli water protector, a father, Hawaiian language educator, and is currently the principal of Kawaihona o Kana'oao Public Charter School. He studies indigenous philosophy and worldview and utilizes Hawaiian cultural traditions as a mechanism to build a more sustainable future for our children and our environment. As a member of Ko'ohewai, a consortium of water protecting Native Hawaiian institutions, he's a proponent of implementing traditional Hawaiian ideologies when making ecological decisions for Hawaii. So a huge mahalo to our 3 panelists for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk story and learn from all of you. So we're just going to jump in straight into the first part of our panel, where we'll get to hear a little bit of the context of what's happening on the ground in Hawaii, Guåhan, and Puerto Rico. As many of us know, throughout history, our island communities have stood on the front lines of environmental pollution and water contamination. And Hawaii, Guåhan, and Puerto Rico all have shared legacies of US military contamination. For our discussion, our panelists are going to dive into these toxic legacies and the lessons learned, and most importantly, how we can come together to protect our water, even though we live across oceans from each other. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to save your questions for after our discussion is Paul. Depending on the time, we'll be able to take probably 2 or 3 questions from the audience, and you can submit those using the Q&A box in the bottom toolbar. If you happen to put it in the chat, we have people monitoring there too, but the Q&A box helps a little with moderation. Moderation. So that would be helpful. Okay, so to kick off our discussion, thank you again to our panelists. Let's start. Can each of you please just briefly explain how your water is being threatened, and then how your communities have mobilized in response? We'll start with Auntie Myrna, then move on to Maria, and then to Kalihua.
Well, I have on my screen right now a video that I will present later on. In response to your question, our contamination came from 6 decades of bombing on our island by the US Navy, NATO, and their allies. 6 decades of serious, unacceptable contamination, poisoning our land, air, water, people. Now, for decades, there's something most important to keep in mind, and it's that we are a colony and have suffered all of the regular sufferings of colonies, and that is that abuse, which tended to take away the power of the people. Not just control, but take away personal power. And so people were afraid to speak out. And then comes the death of a Viequense who is working in the observation tower during some military exercises. And a bomb was dropped on the observation tower by the Navy itself. And there went David Sanes, along with 5 or 6 others. They had never told us exactly how many people died that day or how many people got hurt, but we know that our brother David was killed. And that was the last straw for our community, which had been marching, protesting, going to every possible forum to speak out against what was going on the island, and no attention being paid. Now the blood is spilled and there is David, our dead brother. And that provoked the citizenry to invade the impact area, to stop the bombing of the practices, live bombing, our lives put forth as human shields to stop the bombing, which we did. Which we did after a year of being out there in the impact area. But that leaves us still with totally contaminated island. So I cannot tell you how we have overcome the situation of the contamination of our water, because we don't know. And the EPA is running studies right now about getting information to hopefully find the answer to how contaminated we are. So ours is a story yet to be told as far as our water, sea and drinking. As far as our water is concerned, we'll let you know. And I hope that's not what's going to happen to you. Am I supposed to continue, or is Maria coming on now? Or
I believe we were gonna show the video. Is that right, Marie?
can you hold the video for a moment, please? Is that okay?
Sure. Maria, do you wanna go ahead?
Okay, thank you. Then I'll continue if that's okay. Shall I?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I would like to put something forth, please. I would like you to join me in a heart-centering moment to unite us in our intention to create a culture of peace and compassion within the global community. As brothers and sisters, let us send our love across land and sea to all our relations, especially the children who suffer from the chaos that we have created in this fear-driven age in which we live. Let us breathe as one for humanity. Ábrete corazón, ábrete sentimiento, ábrete entendimiento, deja al lado la razón y deja brillar el sol, escondido en tu interior. Es tiempo ya. Let us open our hearts, so that what we are sharing with humanity is understanding and love and compassion. And that is what that short moment is asking of us. Vieques is located in the Caribbean Sea, 7 miles southeast of the island of Puerto Rico. Other than the main island itself, Vieques is the largest island in the archipelago of our nation, of our colony. And from the 40s until 2003, the US Navy expropriated, administered, and contaminated lands on both the eastern and western ends of the island, where for more than 60 years, about 1 trillion pounds of explosives were dropped on Vieques by the Navy. The lands were used for military training and operations, ship to shore, gunfire, air to ground bombing, naval aircraft, marine amphibious landings, combinations, and to store munitions for the entire Atlantic Fleet training. Extensive amounts of unexploded ordnance and remnants of exploded ordnance have been identified in the range of Vieques and in the surrounding waters. The entire island was transformed into a toxic environmental nightmare and a health hazard for all who call this place home. Consequently, the soil, air, and marine environment were contaminated with toxic metals concentrations 10 miles away from the sequestered community. Military activities included napalm, Agent Orange, and depleted uranium, and the continuously dropping of the explosive bombs. The legacy of contamination affects us to this day. The toxics that rained on the community converted thousands of US citizens to collateral damage statistics and exists as a moral as well as existential problem that screams for reparation. The devastation of our natural resources and disregard for our human right to good health and livelihood in a clean environment where youth and elders, all our relations, can thrive. This is a sin against their existence. Health is life. Sin salud no hay vida. Nini wikoni. Water is life. Whenever you're ready, we could do the video, or I can continue with our island of some 9,000 residents, and this is most important, lacks a hospital to treat asthma, cancer, the chronic diseases that toxic metals produce. The US Navy was forced to close the base in 2003. And the Superfund program, which is being run on our island now, continues to open burn and open detonate. And now, if we could have the video, please. This is a video that was done by Al Jazeera.
I'm in one of the most beautiful places in the Caribbean. This is the island of Vieques, which is in Puerto Rico. But what you can't see are the thousands of active explosives left behind here by the US Navy. That's because for decades, the Navy trained for war by bombing this island. And the way they're going about cleaning up their toxic mess is actually hurting the locals and the environment.
Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, which means residents here are American citizens. But as a small island off the main island, Vieques has suffered years of neglect. And now, with no main hospital after Hurricane Maria and little economic opportunity, many are leaving. At the same time, wealthy Americans from the mainland are buying up prime real estate.
This house is listed for $4.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's worth every penny.
Even though parts of the island are still off limits.
Yeah, I don't want to go over there and get blown up.
Nobody wants to go over there and get blown up, that's for sure.
This peaceful trail I'm on is where the Navy trained for war and dropped hundreds of thousands of bombs for years. Today, it's a national wildlife refuge, which is ironic because it's simultaneously a Superfund site full of toxic munitions that are still littered all over the land and sea. And I've actually seen signs like this that say explosive hazard everywhere.
Until 2003, this refuge was a U.S. Navy range, where the military trained for conflicts like World War II, the Vietnam War, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The land, which makes up one half of the island, is now one of the most hazardous waste sites in the U.S. The Navy's been cleaning up the remnants of their war games by blowing up old bombs, a process called open detonation, which they insist is safe. But some residents are concerned about the health effects from the chemicals released by each new explosion.
What type of munitions are we talking about exactly that the Navy left behind here?
They have basically used everything but the kitchen sink.
This is Daniel Rodriguez. He's the EPA's point person in Vieques. The EPA's overseeing the cleanup.
You can find large munitions, like 2,000-pound bombs, and munitions as small as 20 millimeters. So you had all kind of training activities here for mortars, drop from planes, shoot from boats. These are munitions that were not disposed on the ground, they were fired, and they didn't function.
The Navy has admitted to using toxic chemicals in Vieques, including napalm and depleted uranium. The EPA lists over a dozen contaminants on the island.
I think that we happen to be collateral damage to the military agenda and to the federal government agenda.
Myrna and Ismail are local activists who spent decades trying to kick out the Navy. Now they're fighting for their lives.
I am a cancer survivor. However, in my family, my husband passed away. That was a total metastasized cancer. And his problem then with the heavy metals was arsenic and uranium. And I had uranium also.
These are your medical records from 2000 when the Navy was still here, and your hair sample showed levels of mercury.
Okay.
What do you think that was from?
From the Navy.
Ismail was one of over 200 residents who were tested for mercury, aluminum, cadmium, lead, and arsenic exposure, all present in high explosives. Except for arsenic, 33% of those tested had higher levels than the EPA considers safe.
We have no industry here, so where could all the contamination come from? I believe, as do most of the people here believe, that is because of the military practices, the bombing, and the fact that they were experimenting here with non-conventional weapons.
The rates of cancer in Vieques are higher than the rest of Puerto Rico, historically up to 27%, though it's hard to track today since so many people have left the island. And to get treatment, patients have to travel on an unreliable ferry to the main island. Ismail makes that trip regularly for dialysis.
Para yo ir a atenderme, me tengo que ir hoy a las 3 de la tarde. En estos días no hay mucha garantía. En estos días muchos enfermos no rehúsan moverse de Vieques y prefieren cancelar sus quimioterapias, sus radioterapias, sus tratamientos, porque no se atreven a aventurarse a viajar, porque de allá viene un gentío y no se nos garantiza a nosotros el poder regresar. Yo recuerdo las bombas nos pasaban por encima, los cañones nos pasaban por encima.
You've saved all of these memories from your fight against the Navy.
We stopped amphibious landing.
Whoa.
One incident in particular ignited a movement. In 1999, a Marine fighter jet accidentally dropped 2 500-pound bombs on a Navy observation post, killing a local security guard and wounding 4 others. In response, protesters occupied the Navy base, stopping them from conducting exercises for an entire year.
Aquí hubo multiplicidad de apoyo a nivel mundial, no solamente en Puerto Rico ni en Estados Unidos.
Stop the bombing.
until the military forcibly cleared the encampments in 2000. President George W. Bush ordered the Navy to leave by 2003. This was supposed to initiate a cleanup process, but 16 years later, locals say the cleanup hasn't been transparent or efficient.
How much has the Navy cleaned up and how much is left?
The Navy has surface clear, a little bit over 4,000 acres.
4,000 out of 10,000?
Out of 10,000. Surface clear.
So that doesn't even include what's underground and what's in the water?
That doesn't include what's underground.
So there's a long way to go before this place gets cleaned up?
There is some more to go, exactly.
When will they finish?
That dates varies from time to time. There are numbers being tossed around that could be taken to 2030.
Why is it taking so long?
It's a very risky type of cleanup. When you're dealing with munitions, you can't go that fast.
What grade would you give the Navy so far?
They're doing a good job.
A?
They're doing a good job.
Hardly any independent studies have been carried out to examine the military's impact on the public's health. The Navy consistently points to one controversial government study that concluded there's no negative impact, but multiple scientists, researchers, and locals have seriously questioned the findings.
Cancer is very prevalent in here.
This is Dr. Pagan. She's one of the only general physicians in Vieques. I asked her why people here are more likely to develop cancer than those on the main island.
There must be some carcinogenic higher than the rest of the island.
Why?
Here in Vieques. Oh, because of the bombing.
So if you live in Vieques, there's a higher chance that you have cancer. If you have cancer, you cannot get treatment here, and you have to go to the main island, and going to the main island in and of itself is a big hardship. That feels like a hopeless situation.
Yes, that's why most of them move. They find another place to live.
But other residents see things differently.
Sobre Vieques a 20 años de la muerte de David Sanes. So Dina, good morning.
Good morning. Buenos días.
Buenos días. ¿Habla español?
Un poquito.
Excelente.
This is Robert Rabin. He was arrested 5 times for protesting the Navy. He now directs the Vieques Historical Archives and hosts a radio show.
Gentrification now is more a danger to the very existence of the culture and community of Vieques as we know it.
So you believe that after Hurricane Maria, there's been more gentrification?
Yes.
Why?
Yes, because people tend to leave. People in Puerto Rico, hundreds of thousands of people have left Puerto Rico to go to the United States. That means they're selling their property cheap, and the same is happening here. People are looking for other alternatives, and so they're, the realtors, speculators, investors, all part of the dynamics of gentrification, are taking advantage of the post-Maria situation.
Robert says the Navy cleanup is yet another example of locals being excluded from economic opportunities.
We had hoped that in the cleanup process would really mean a lot of economic benefit for the community, but of the hundreds of millions of dollars that the federal government has spent on cleanup so far, the greatest amount of that is going to large U.S. corporations that are in control of the process.
The Navy didn't want to talk on camera. In an email, they defended open detonation as the safest process for the site workers handling the munitions, and said the explosions pose no health risks to the public.
He is currently conducting a removal of surface munitions. When that critical time period, which they consider may take another 20 years, when that surface cleanup is over, the Navy will then study what the possible contamination on our land may be. That includes water, that includes everything. It includes all our natural resources are holding on the surface cleanup. How long is this going to take? How many more millions of dollars? How many more people are going to die from cancer on this island? Just a moment ago, you met Bob Rabin on the video, a fighter for Vieques, a leader, a true leader in our community, just died a couple of months ago from cancer, as many of our people have died. And fooling around with numbers will tell you that We no longer have 27% more cancer than the rest of Puerto Rico, which we did. It's just that we are 27% more apt to die from our cancer because we have no medical attention on this island. It's a ludicrous story, it's a sad story, and it's a real story. And this is the baddest part of it. As a Superfund site, what kind of cleanup is being conducted? What kind of preparation was made to clean up a place where trillions of pounds of explosives were thrown? Well, in communities across the United States and its territories, the Department of Defense and Energy, NASA, and private industries routinely open burn and open detonate countless tons of hazardous munitions into the open air, despite the availability of commercial, safer technologies. This devastating practice continues. And even though the island, Vieques, is currently presented as an ideal tourism spot, the toxic chemicals remaining on Vieques tell a very different story. PCBs, napalm, uranium make the island very dangerous. And while the Navy is no longer here, the toxins are far from gone.
Auntie Myrna, we're hearing a lot of, it resonates so much. There's so many similarities here in Hawaii. We're just a little bit concerned about time, so maybe we can move on to Myrna for now, and then we'll come back and have lots more time for conversation. Maria, are you ready? Thank you, Auntie Myrna.
Thank you so much, Myrna. I almost want you to take my time because the information you're sharing is so amazing. And I was actually blessed to be part of a meeting with Ceasefire a couple months back, and with Protego Tex and Sabre Tidian, because we're also experiencing this threat of open burning. And I remember leaving the meeting thinking, wow, I was just so inspired by you. So yeah, it's so great to be here today. I just have a slideshow, just 8 slides that I just wanted to go through. And I'm just going to share it just 1 moment. Okay, can everybody see that slide?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to start with this intro. Hita Ihanam, we are water. I want to credit Jeremy Cepeda, because a lot of the time we say Linatla Ihanam, water is life, and this is just another way to get across that we are, we are nothing without our water. We are, majority, we are composed of water. And so, just thought it would be powerful to include that and just acknowledge Jeremy Cepeda, an amazing activist, was the one who shared this phrase with us. So Buenas and Hafate, Guasi Maria Hernandez May. It's an honor to be here today, joined in solidarity with water protectors from Hawaii and Puerto Rico. And thank you so much to Sierra Club and Hawaii Progressive Action for bringing us all together today in this powerful space. I'm so grateful to be here today, but it's also very scary to be here on this panel because it really shines light on this reality that we're all here because we're in a water crisis. Our communities are among countless around the world trying to find solutions to improve access to clean water and to ultimately defend our human right to safe and clean drinking water. So here on Guam, our home is scarred by war and contamination that has never been cleaned up, including multiple Superfund sites. 25 years later, after the Andersen Air Force Base was placed on the US EPA's national priorities list, they're still cleaning up contamination on the land that it operates. The base is on the critical list of US EPA Superfund sites since 1992, and these sites contain high levels of uncontrolled or abandoned hazardous waste. And so I'm here today to kind of shed light on the ways that our aquifer and our water sources are extremely vulnerable and are in danger. And so wanted to talk a little bit about Protecula Texan Save Rotidi, and how we came about was in response to massive military training proposed for Guåhan, a US Marine live fire training range complex. And I wanted to show here a map. The dark blue or dark gray areas that is military occupied land. And so 1/3 of our land is controlled by the Department of Defense. And, you know, like I mentioned in the previous slide, we have so much historical contamination that has yet to be cleaned up. And that historical contamination continues to be exacerbated by continued and relentless military activity, including the firing range complex that I mentioned. Another Marine base is being added to our existing hyper-militarized landscape. And, you know, as Myrna spoke about, open burn, open detonation is another issue that we're dealing with here. We have also history of PFAS and PFAS contamination, which are forever chemicals. And I'm sure everybody here is familiar with those chemicals. And the reality is that the US military has the record of being the worst polluter in the world. There are many examples of military destruction, other human activities that have impacted aquifers, water sources, all over the world. And his horrible contamination continues to impact the lives of millions and millions of people. And so, it's important for us to get together in spaces like this, because the reality is that the crisis isn't going to get better if we get complacent. So it's more important now than ever to take a stand. And if you look at the movements here on Guam, you see that so many of us are mothers. We fight to protect our babies, our families, and their future. And so I just am going to go into a little bit about the situation that we're experiencing here. So Guam is a political status. Our political status is a US administered non-self-governing territory, both under domestic and international law. And it's become more and more clear over the last few years as the buildup has moved forward. If you've come to Guam at any point, or if you do in the future, if you drive in northern Guam, all you see in the roads in northern Guam are massive clearings leading to this area where they're going to be, where they're building the US Marine Live Fire Training Range Complex. And the reality is that we don't have a say. We don't have a say in what's done on our home. And Protecula Texan Save Rotidi has gone through so many different avenues, through meeting with senators, meeting with actual military officials, countless outreach events, countless protests, to try to raise awareness about impacts to our environment, our culture, our water source. And, you know, even in sitting with our own governor, she has expressed that the reality is that we're a colony of the United States. And one example that I can think of where she had tried to put her foot down about a builder project that was, it's harming one of the last remaining mother trees species that we have here on Guam called the Hudson Lagu tree. And she had asked the DOD if you could just pause construction around our mother tree. And she was told straight out by the Admiral, no. And so that's the kind of trouble that we have here on Guam, where, you know, the reality is that we just don't have a say in anything, any military projects that move forward on our land. And a lot of the time, the way that comments are collected are through a website, and it's just endless jargon. And it's something that we've called attention to, like the timeframes for public comment are 30 days most of the time. And so we tend to call attention to the ways that that is an injustice to our people, that we're hit with all of this jargon, and then we have this short time frame to jump on a website, and it's an intimidating process. So it's just been that, like, repeated, you know, one thing after the other, that, you know, when we see these mass clearings in our island, it's almost like we try our best not to get desensitized, because it's so common to see just mass clearings of land. I wanted to share that, well, just on the topic of mass clearings of land, it's 900 football fields of land that have been cleared so far, and this is for a marine base and the range complex, and these are being built above our northern lens aquifer. So that's a lot of tree coverage that has been cleared, and that is essential for the aquifer to properly recharge. And so I wanted to share this article because this is something that kind of is, it talks about the aquifer. A lot of time when we kind of explain to the community that our aquifer is at risk, a lot of time we have to kind of start from that very basic level of the way that the aquifer works, because the reality is that some people don't even really know about our aquifer. And so this is an article from 2003, and it was written by John Jensen. And there are some really important things that I wanted to highlight, because right now we're in the midst of military projects, and we're not getting the same concern that we see in this article from 2003 pre-build-up. What we're getting from water experts now is that, you know, you don't have anything to worry about, that you could clear all of the trees above the aquifer and that it would still run at 100%. And that, you know, 6.7 million bullets being shot above our main water source per year is not something that we really need to worry about. That's kind of like the general sentiment that we're getting. But what we are coming back with is, you know, just kind of sharing third grade science and saying that, no, you need tree coverage over your aquifer, and you know, going back to articles like this that kind of talk about the aquifer being a gigantic sponge. A lot of people don't really know that in this article, it talks about the way that the rain percolates slowly downward through the network of pores in the sponge. And it's quoted in here saying the hazard that we face is that because our aquifer is so porous, it's so easily contaminated. And so there are other parts of this article that I wanted to highlight about the way that contaminants are stored and they rush down to the freshwater lens. And so it says in the article, when the surface and the near surface parts of the aquifer are relatively dry, they probably temporarily store contaminants from surface sources. And when a heavy rainfall occurs, whether from a local thunderstorm or from an island-wide event like a tropical storm or a typhoon, the stored contaminants can then be rapidly rushed down to the freshwater lens. And so, you know, that's concerning. That's concerning as a people, and that's not something that we're hearing from local water experts today. And just this morning, US EPA, one of their staff sent me, I requested a study. It was a 2010 study on groundwater monitoring on Guam. And it's about management responses to recent water quality violations. So in the study itself, it's really important. It's something that we as a group need to continue to do outreach on, because it's a water expert on Guam who has been working with the aquifer for more than 30 years. And in the study, just in the abstract, it talks about how the US military has occupied large tracts of land in this region for the past 60 years. So it says, quote, "The risks of groundwater contamination are therefore very real, considering the population density in northern Guam and the rapid recharge rates to the underlying aquifer." So again, this is the live fire training range complex image that shows how massive it is in northern Guam. The buffer zone for the range extends 3 miles out into the ocean. So our fishermen wouldn't be allowed to fish in the area. Our healers are not able to collect their rare amet that is needed for specifically the amet that's that there's a lot of in northern Guam, and specifically at Ritidian Refuge, is medicine for children. And so I just wanted to share a story about how my son was sick and I needed to take him to a Zoamti, and there were maybe 5 other families with me, and they didn't have a specific plant that's needed, but the refuge was closed. So a couple of our members had to go and request to visit the site to gather medicine. And so, you know, that's just the reality that we face, that a lot of our lands are federalized. We don't have access to these areas that we need to have access to be able to perpetuate our culture. And something that PLSR, our organization, has always stressed is that it's hard to separate everything. You know, when we talk about water, you know, it's important to talk about, you know, we always say, like, our water is our living ancestor, and we need to talk about, you know, our people as well. We need to talk about the land above the aquifer, that it is home to endangered species. We need to talk about, you know, the ways that tree coverage is important. We need to talk about the injustice at the center of the live firing range complex is an Indigenous land rights issue. And I'm actually a 5th generation descendant of original landowners who, if you look at this map, this image, the Guam National Wildlife Refuge, that area is my family's ancestral land. And so it's going to be used as a buffer zone for this firing range complex. I think I might be going a little bit over time, but I just wanted to share some of the organizations that are also doing this work on Guam. There's a coalition of about 45 of us who really come together and try to advocate for our water resources, because there's so much at risk. You know, it's not just one thing. It's sometimes I have to, like, take a step back and really think to myself, you know, is our island going to be livable in 15 years? You know, is it going to be safe for, you know, all of our children? And I know watching, what has happened in Red Hill, what has happened around the world, all of these promises that are being made, people saying, oh, the military will follow the Clean Water Act, there's nothing to be worried about. And they have to abide by all these regulations, but we have to remember that when they use the words in the interest of national security, that is, that's the way that they can get away with everything when they say that it's for national security. And I think that's what we saw in Red Hill, where they were saying, oh, we need this. This is a critically important area. And then, now during litigation, they're saying, actually, it's not as important. It's an outdated facility. And so it really makes you think, it makes you want to take what the DoD says with a grain of salt. And so, yeah, I just wanted to put some of these people and these organizations on the screen to acknowledge all of their hard work. I'm sure, there's a youth organization, Protect Guam Water. They're amazing. They have shared a lot of the actual constituents that are going to be used at the range and some of the health impacts. Hope Cristobal and Ken Cooper are working on over the last couple of years, I've been working on a study related to PFAS and PFAS. I'm excited to see the results of that. PLSR is also working on a film series. And so we've been going all around the Marianas to speak with water protectors, and we're adding more places on top of that. So we're trying to visit Hawaiʻi. We're actually planning to visit at the end of this month. So hoping to connect with some of the Oahu water protectors. I'm already in contact with some, and hopefully it all comes together. And we'll share the film series and all of that when that's done. And I just want to lastly say, this is the Mariana Islands Training and Testing Study Area. So the MERC, it used to be called the MERC, Mariana Island Range Complex, and the military trains and tests in the land, sea, and skies in these areas. And they expanded. It used to be a 500,000 nautical miles. They doubled this training area to almost 1 million square nautical miles. It's larger than Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, and this is all happening around our islands, and wanted to shed light on that. Also do a shout out to our Commonwealth 670 in Saipan. They're amazing.
Maria, can you possibly maybe share that information in the chat so we can we have time for
I'm a little bit over time. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I think I commented on some of the other stuff. I feel like all of us could talk for maybe an hour about all of the water issues that we're experiencing, but thank you so much. I just really appreciate this opportunity to share what's going on in my home, and really appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Kalihua, are you ready to share?
Yeah. Yeah, ho makawau maka olelo ka aina o Hawaiʻi ni. No ka mea malila ko kākou noʻe au, a ka noʻe au kia lau ki akamai ana, ka noʻe au kia lau ka noʻo ana. A ki akamai kia la, a ka noʻe au kia la o ke kukulu ana I ke ala e puka lana kila I nā oiwi o ka aina holo o koa e like me nā mea mamua mai I haʻi olelo meila. A ka me ke la olelo aloha nui kākou. I think, going third on this panel is really difficult because the stories are so similar. I think for myself, the really poignant points to bring up in the conversation about kapukaki in Hawaii, Red Hill, is that the same branch of military that landed in Honolulu Harbor and overthrew our queen in 1893 is the same entity that's poisoning our aquifer and potentially deeming one of our main islands as potentially uninhabitable. And so these are the points in a conversation that I think align when I listen to the previous speakers. Just for a little background and history, that in 1943, those 20 tanks were embedded into Red Hill, Kapukaki. And since that time, there have been 73 documented reported leaks of over 180,000 gallons of fuel and petroleum products that have, and other contaminants that have gone into our main aquifer. And the main aquifer feeds 20% of the pumps that come out of there. That water feeds 20% of the population, but the aquifer supplies 77% of the island with their water. And so this is, and I use air quotes, but the state of Hawaii, this is the most populated island in the capital. And if the United States Navy can do that to such an important spot in one of their designated territories, there is no limit to the destruction that they can provide. From that point, I think what gets us into the conversation now about Kapukaki is the May 6th and November 20th spill of 2021 that actually entered into the well and was funneled into Navy housing facility and went into the homes of 93,000 residents. And I think for us, the surprising part is that most of those residents were not from here. They were residents that are Navy staff and personnel. And the Navy still seems to kind of embrace and move along with that culture of complacency and the lack of urgency in every report and every moment that they spend addressing this issue, even when it pertains to their own people. There's still, potential for 400,000 other people from Moanalua all the way over to what's an area known as Hawaii, Maunalua, traditionally, to be affected by these spills. But up until this point, there's just been numerous cover-up points in the reporting that are cover-ups, numerous conversations to diminish the severity of what the people are still feeling in those affected areas, and numerous conversations to kind of deflect away from the true devastation that is occurring right now. And unfortunately, with the information that we know, it's a travesty. And the other form of data for myself that's devastating is the amount of lying and denying that's occurring. And so that even though it's devastating with the amount of contamination that has already taken place, that it's way worse. And I can say that with almost 100% certainty that it's way worse. And I think that's the message that for us, historically, that's what gets us again to this point in the space of building what we called a koa. And I share about that because I think what Maria was talking about is really going back to the idea that our culture is our link to the best practices that come from indigenous wisdom from our geographic areas. And those practices are what should be implemented now to be able to better organize and decide for the well-being of our natural world. And really understanding that the US military as a terrorist in that war against the natural world, and the indigenous mindset, the indigenous worldview, being that protector, being that defender of not just natural resources for humanity, but really exiting out of that realm of human-centric decision-making and offering all of our ecological brothers and sisters and affording them the same freedoms that we always naturally want to afford ourselves. And that's a completely different conversation. And so what we did is we erected a koa, which is a traditional structure, and that was in response to, and not necessarily in protest to, but in response to building a spiritual linkage to our ancestral knowledge and our tradition, asking for help, and really calling upon one of our ancestors, Kane Kawaiola, Kane, the body form of Kane, of the living waters, and embedded him into a ko'a, which is a traditional structure to call upon resources. And again, I think there's a few videos where this is explained, but just so for the folks that don't know what that is, that a ko'a is used to attract fish, to attract, we've used it contemporarily to attract water and rain, just to attract the things that create life and sustenance. And so that ko'a was built with the ideology that we are spiritually calling upon our ancestors and spiritually calling upon our gods to stand with us in this space, and to reinvigorate the resources necessary to sustain life on Oahu, and to reinvigorate naturally the level of pristine resources that they left us prior to us allowing the United States or the United States Navy forcing themselves upon this land. And so in that conversation, we built a ko'a, and we just coming out of a 10-day vigil at the ko'a called Anahulu at the ko'a. What an Anahulu is it's a 10-day cycle in the 30-day calendar month in Hawaiian tradition. And the first 10 days of each month is called mahuahua, and mahuahua means to grow, because that's kind of what we're asking, that the next action step is that we will be taking these ideas and taking these the perspective that we're messaging out now into our communities to generate, to ho'omahuahua, to grow a critical mass. And we are not at that point right now, because I think there's an ambient weight that comes with American colonialism, and it occurs hegemonically within our day-to-day practices and the things that we think. And so there's a level of comfort that our society, the people of Hawaii, feel when the United States Navy, put their spells on us and tell them that everything's going to be okay, and tells us that everything, and it's not really that bad. And unfortunately, again, going back to with the data that we've shared, that 180,000 gallons since the day that it was built, and and ultimately about 16 to 17,000 gallons within the last year that went into pipes, went into homes, and went into human beings that had to go seek medical attention was, again, this is the level of travesty that we're talking about. And so by going into communities, building that critical mass, that we begin to push back against militarism, that there is a level of fact that comes with all in the chat box, all of the data that comes from wherever American imperialism exists, is that they do not leave their place better than they found it. They never have, and they never will. They do not embrace that ideology. Their ideology, they are the sword of a society that only knows how to take. And we don't come from that here in Hawaii. And so because of that, knowing that they will never do anything but defend their ability to take and to be the cancer on the planet that they are, it's more going around into communities and bringing our efforts into all communities, Native Hawaiian and non-Native Hawaiian, to generate a critical mass to be able to push against militarism and actually get them out of Hawaii for good. And so part of why we spent the 10 days at the ko'a was that a report just came out that was purporting a 2.5 year cleanup plan. And again, there's no sense of urgency. They're still employing that culture of complacency. And so the community engagement will be the first step. And many of the military leases are coming up in 2029. And we're going to be springboarding off of that communication strand into the communities to make sure that we can do our best to disallow those leases. And so I will stop right there. I know that we can have much more conversation about that, but I hope that was informative enough to begin our talk.
Thank you so much to all three of you. And I echo everything in the chat. We could really do like a weekend transoceanic retreat and just learn and compare notes and, you know, feel less alone in our struggles. But thank you for condensing such complex issues and helping us learn so much about each of your homes. I want to invite our audience to insert questions into the Q&A box. But before we get into those, I just wanted to spend a few minutes kind of opening the floor again to our panelists to maybe quickly go around and share ideas for how we can water these buds of solidarity between our islands. Because each of you have, like, you bring such special experience in that. I know Kalihua, in one of the interviews that came out right after the ko'a at the Pacific Base Command was built, you were asked what you would say to people and families who'd been poisoned by the recent leak, and your response was to join us, which resonated with many people. And hearing you talk, I know that us encompasses so much more than what we might think, like our non-human relatives. And Maria, when the crisis began, we also saw solidarity actions in Guåhan. And I can tell you, as a member of Oahu Water Protectors, that meant so much to us and really helped our community to see that this isn't just an isolated incident. It's related to these broader structures of militarism and colonialism and occupation. And Myrna, I know a lot of your work has been focused on building transnational relationships by representing Vieques at peace conferences and at the UN. So with each of you having such a rich background of solidarity building, not just in the strategic sense, but in kind of like what Myrna was saying, the human sense, can each of you maybe share some thoughts on how we can support each other, not just in confronting contamination by the US military, but in really rebuilding those worldviews that can bring us to hopefully a future where our water is clean and safe and respected as sacred. Anyone want to go first?
I want to say thank you to Dr. Krug, to Maria, and to all of you whom I have the honor of having met because of this conference, this bringing together that you have initiated at this moment. It's when you're facing something that is so big that you don't know where to begin, but you do know that you're not going to give up. You do know that, and that's what I feel is happening here. We are dealing with the most powerful military structure in the history of the world. And but where do we start? And honestly, I know this is true, that we have to start with ourselves. And as we center and as we grow, when we come in contact, as you and I are in contact on this miraculous thing called Zoom, we speak in total honesty to each other. And we commit ourselves to a vision that we all hold together about. It's not just the thing of stop the bombing or finish the cleanup. It's a spiritual revolution has to take place in our time. It's the time that we have chosen to live or been chosen to be here, whatever, who understands? That's what we can't answer, but we can. work on ourselves, get stronger, and unite our efforts into a team. I think that's what I'm feeling now. You're creating a team, and I'm so honored to be on your team and working together and keeping our vision clear that you cannot trust politicians and you cannot trust the military complex because they are totally operating on power and money. And that is not where we want to go. I know that's not where we want to go. We want to be beautiful people and create a beautiful world for our children and devote ourselves entirely to that. Thank you. Thank you for making this call. And thank you for inviting us to come to this call. And I'm part of your team. I'm honored. Auntie Myrna, thank you. Okay.
I got chicken skin. Maria, did you want to go next?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Amazing. See, that first meeting that I had with Myrna too, I was like, oh, I just feel inspired because you just remind me of my aunties and my mom, and it can get heavy, you know, like doing this work gets really heavy, and it's just adds to that generational trauma, and you just have to remember that resilience, you know, that you know, we have generational trauma, but we also have, you know, resilience that got us to where we are today. And so I'm inspired every time I just get stressed out or overwhelmed, or even the women in our organization, we get stressed out and overwhelmed. All we need to really do is talk to a Saina, who our elder, who kind of centers us, and that's how we're, you know, we kind of move forward and can continue the work because we're inspired. And I guess in terms of, you know, building solidarity, a quote that comes to mind that was shared by our Commonwealth 670 organization based in Saipan. They shared, there's a gulf difference between viewing the Pacific as islands in a far sea and a sea of islands. And so that was by Kalihua. And so that stuck with me. I think they posted that years ago. And so that quote just kind of stuck with me. And it just reminds me that whenever there's a struggle somewhere in the Pacific, our first thought here on Guam is how can we organize? And so when we see, you know, what is happening all throughout Pacifica, you know, you mentioned, you know, that there was, you know, in response to Red Hill, PLSR, when we first heard about what happened to Red Hill, we were like, okay, we need to raise awareness. This is insane. I think we were all in shock and disbelief and standing with you all. And so we decided to hold a water event. And what we did was we got a large canvas. We invited the community to come and have their nannies, their children, put their hands in paint, and we just came together unified and created a huge banner and put it up, you know, hung it up on like a flagpole, and it was such a beautiful day and also so tragic because we were remembering all of the people who were affected. There were, from what I remember from the news reports, some schools that were affected. Thinking about all the children, thinking about everybody who is suffering because of this crisis. And then as part of this water fellowship, that, you know, that I truly believe is guided by our Saina, that, you know, PLSR is able to do this work where we're connecting with activists throughout the Marianas and throughout the Pacific to raise awareness about what's going on. And you really learn through this work how unifying water is, because we might not agree on issues of the environment or issues of you know, how to best protect cultural resources. There's always debate around those things, but the reality is that we all need clean drinking water. And so even though in the Marianas, you know, there is a lot of, you know, World War II caused a lot of real trauma that exists to today, and kind of a divide between some of our people. And so it's been so powerful to connect with organizations who we've been kind of working in solidarity with just on social media, but finally meeting them in person and just giving them a big hug and saying, wow, you know, we understand, like we're with you, we stand with you. And so there's just a difference between doing everything that we do now through social media and then kind of bringing it full circle, meeting in person. So I guess maybe that's what I would suggest. You know, anytime any of you are in Guam, please reach out. We love, you know, we just love when people reach out and we, you know, first thing that we suggest is, hey, let's take a tour of the Texan, you know, my family's land, another ancestral land, another one of our members, Manika Flores, has land at Hernandez, which is also an area that is being affected by open burn, open detonation, and so she always offers up her home to her ancestral home to do tours. So please, if you're ever in Guam, let's connect. And I guess that's the way that I would say to water the buds of solidarity. Just kind of make those connections, not just online, but if you do happen to be in the area, definitely reach out and we can give each other a big hug and and continue solidarity and organize and brainstorm and that sort of thing. So thank you so much.
Most importantly, hug.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give all of our attendees a heads up. We're probably going to go a few minutes over time. There's a couple questions in the chat that we'll get to, but Kalihua, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, I'm going to try to address some of the questions too. That's what I was just looking at. But I you know, in listening to, I mean, and it was hard. I'll tell you, Anake, Myrna, that while you were speaking, it's hard not to feel emotional, because I think what we're doing just in our own spaces is really trying to find the right thoughts and the right questions and the right words to speak to the heart of people that don't carry the same ideology as us. Not everybody believes in the same things, and it's really difficult to face that reality. I think for myself, becoming the message is that first stage, and that's what I think for us at the Koa is not just walking through life and being on a you know, not being mindful and not being aware that really you are more, your capacity as a member of our species is greater than the capacity that you think you have. And so that when there are messages like this that deal with not just human well-being, but the well-being of our makua, our mother, Papahanau Moku, that we step forward and there's no other choice. And I think in the messaging, that all I could think about while you were talking was some of the words that we carry here is that wherever we are from, especially as Native peoples, that our people are the experts of that place, that our people, you know, utilizing the words of our contemporary, that they ran longitudinal studies of thousands of years to get to where we're at. And the data that they collected and crunched and analyzed and synthesized became what was known as our culture. Like, we lived because of that study that they were running, and they were running that study on behalf of humanity. You know, they were the humans representing our species in our geographic areas. And so in Hawaii, our culture is the way. It's the most informed way. It's the way based off of data. It's the way based off of data that no human alive could ever collect, because it's thousands of years old. And I think being able to share that message across our spaces to inspire our peoples and to inspire our cultures to really lift themselves, not just for our people, you know, not just for culture's sake or not just for our language's sake, but for the sake of the natural world, for the sake of our ecology, for the sake of our ability as humanity to actually move on. And so I think for that's that space is becoming the message is really one of the next steps, that as we do form our teams and we do like in the, you know, in the boxes, what are the organized action steps to really galvanize physical spaces of not just meeting, but action, that when we need each other, that we can call and we can physically be there for each other. That's got to be part of the next stage. I just don't, you know, I think it's the philanthropic side of getting moving people physically with money there. And I think that can potentially be an easy fix. But that's all I could think about, you know. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. I'm looking through the questions in the Q&A. I feel like Kalihua, you touched on one that asked if we need to build a larger umbrella coalition. And so did you, Auntie Myrna, by talking about how we're now part of a team. I think since we only have time for one, I'm gonna go with one that two people asked, which is how can those that are not physically located in affected communities best support the movement from afar? And how can those in the United States that are not affected stand in solidarity? If any of you have thoughts on that.
Well, I would give you this name, which is, I'm sorry about the noise, justiceforviequesnow.org. If you're interested in any more information about Vieques, that's the place to go. And I'm just feeling so inspired right now by Dr. Krug's words, frankly, in that I agree with him so totally about we are the message. I mean, we must become what we pray for. We must become what we're getting together for. We must be full of kindness and compassion and get smart. We can't let them have us falling asleep and feeling defeated. We are not defeated. We are, as Dr. Krug just said, stronger than we can possibly imagine. If we truly go down deep into ourselves, we find that strength. And when a bunch of us are doing it, I mean, we've got a team of people truly committed to a vision of purity for life, for our babies, for our plants, for our world. There's no place better than the place we're in right now, because we are, I believe, awake. That's what I hear tonight. I hear people who are awake, and that means we are powerful, even in front of the military complex and the creators of the bombs and all the rest of it. And I'm sorry, I do run off. I'm sorry, but I have to mention one more thing, which is the ceasefire campaign to ban open fire pits worldwide. And in the Justice for Now that I mentioned before, we have a campaign going for a hospital on this island for medical services. Thank you. I feel stronger for having been with you. Thank you.
Maria or Kalihua, did you have anything you wanted to add to answer that question? Okay, we're gonna also put, oh, sorry, go ahead.
What's it, people like who are in the continental US, like how they can help, right? That was what I was kind of asked this question before, you know, and I guess when you think about, like when I talk to a lot of people out in the US, they have no idea, like they have no idea that this is even happening in the territories, and it's just not within their periphery, you know, it's not their daily lives that they're living. And so I guess in thinking back on how on this question, like how they could help, of course, like any form of solidarity would be helpful. There's a huge diaspora, Chamorro diaspora that really they try to organize themselves. Like, for example, there's one called Masakata Collective out in the US. They're all over, and they do what they can from afar. And so joining organizations like that is also so helpful. But I guess I was just thinking when I was asked that question by a reporter, I was like, it made me kind of feel like in a way that I was small, because I was like, how do we let the whole world know what's happening here? And I guess the biggest thing that I thought to myself was, we need to kind of continue to put out there this reality that we're not victims. You know, we're suffering, you know, we're continuing to experience so much suffering, but we don't let that define us. And we continue to rise above that. And so I would say, in their capacity, do whatever you feel compelled to do as an outsider who's hearing about this injustice. Amazing. But I ask that you don't see us as
victims.
Don't see us as victims. See us as people that are trying to rise above. And that's just kind of what came to mind. I wasn't even going to answer, but that came to mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kalihua, did you have any closing words? Okay, thank you. Well, for my part, I've had chicken skin this whole time. And I just wanted to, well, since Kalihua is not speaking, I'm going to draw from his words, because at the Honolulu, at the Ko'a the other day, he said something that really shook me, which was that what happened at Kapukaki is the closest we've come to watching an entire island die. And I had to sit with that for a long time, thinking about how we need to really accept the gravity of the situation in order to act with the urgency that it demands. But then at the same time, at the Honolulu and then in spaces like this, we see that like that moment of where we come so close to watching something die are also the moments where we get to see our community come alive. And I felt that at the Ko'a, and I feel that right now. And well, this community is pretty cool because it stretches from Guåhan to Hawaiʻi to Vieques. So yeah, thank you so much. And I also just wanted to highlight a quote from the chat. Someone quoted you, Auntie Myrna, and said, I feel stronger for, where is it? I feel stronger for being together with you. And that's what solidarity feels like. So with that, I will hand it over to Wayne. And thank you so much again to all of our panelists and our sponsors. And you can find their socials in the chat too.
Thank you, Tina. And yeah, thank you so much. This was such a powerful discussion. And just thank you again to our panelists, our moderator, our co-host Hapa, and our many co-sponsors, and to everyone that's joining us here today. And I also really want to say thank you to the panelists for the hope you've provided us, because from what you've shown us, we know that people won't stop fighting. We know that water can and will bring us together. And that as we connect communities, as we connect superheroes like yourselves together, our team, our side will only grow stronger, exponentially so, and the other side will weaker. And thank you for that. And for everyone else, please reflect on and share what you've learned today, with your families, with your friends, your coworkers. Let them know your thoughts about, what you've seen. And let them know, we can no longer be bystanders in this struggle. Our choice now really is to stand by and let this pattern of destruction continue, or we can take a stand with the indigenous, with the frontline communities who have not forgotten that water is life, who have been putting their bodies and their freedom and their lives on the line to hold the line against the destruction of water and all the things that we need and our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will truly need to survive. And if you can muster up a group of folks who want to do so, reach out to us at the Sierra Club of Hawaii, to Hapa, reach out to the panelists today. Their contact information is in the chat, or water protectors in your area, and see what you can do to help support the fight. And in the meantime, please stay tuned because we're not done. We actually have one more Hanaho panel being lined up as we speak, with more amazing presenters to talk about the networks that are now being created to put up a united front to protect water across the oceans, across continents, throughout the planet. And again, thank you so much. Oh, and I'll hand it off to Anne, if you wanted to say a few closing words.
I think you got it all, Wayne. Just thank you so much to our incredible panelists, and to Tina. It was really inspirational to just spend this time with you all today. So mahalo, everyone.
Thank you, Situs Masi.